Greetings, traveler.
Let's review some patches in this patch review thing, I suppose. So it's quite a big one, lots of changes. Let me disable chat for this one. Sorry chat, you can come back after. We're gonna start with some hero powers. I'm not going to spend an equal amount of time on everything. I'm going to look at things that I think are gonna be more meaningful and then linger a bit there. But a lot of the other stuff we're gonna go through quite fast. Cthulhu goes to 2-1. Honestly, I am not sure if that suddenly makes him playable. The issue with a lot of these heroes, and we're going to cover all the heroes and then I sort of give my take on it. You have Cthulhu, right? Obviously that's better, right? The question is it enough better? Same thing with Jailer. Jailer now goes to when 7 minions die instead of 9. Ragnaros goes to after 20 minions die instead of 25. Edwin goes to buying 3 cards instead of buying 4 cards. Sourfang doubles 2-2, right? So has more HP. Instead, and that actually matters quite a bit because you go from 1 to 2. Right now you go from 2 to 4 to 8 to 16. So that is quite nice. All right, Guff changes a little different, right? So I'm gonna talk about these first because they all kind of do the same. Essentially, what happens here with all these hero power changes is this is a hero that doesn't really give you any economy. It doesn't really set you up for the late game better, or the mid game for that matter. It's a mechanic that gives you stats, and generally that's not what makes for a good hero. What makes for a good hero a lot of the time is, can you get a unit for cheap? Can you get something like a Lich that steals a unit for 2 gold, especially if you have Rewinder, you don't take any damage. You're now making a gold profit every turn. You can have something like, what are some other stuff like Panda, who can then take the best of all heroes, right? A little here, a little there. Right, so something like a Togwaggle, something like an Omu, something like a Cookie. What all those heroes have in common is that their hero power will give them extra gold. And with extra gold, it gives you an opportunity to get something you're not supposed to have on that turn. So you can level a little bit faster, you can just triple a little bit faster, you can take that trinket and still level, and you can set up your strategy. Because in the end, what makes for a winning board isn't an Edwin buff, it isn't a Jailer buff. You're not gonna win because, you know, you get like +8/+8 on a unit every turn, or then 9/9 or 10/10 or whatnot. You win because you have a Bran, and then you have Rock, or you have Urzel, or you have double Tethys, and now you have money, and you can do stuff, or you roll into a combo like Titus and Leapers. These hero powers, they don't win you the game. So having to pay the price of not having a hero power that makes it easier for you to get to a winning board generally just makes these heroes bad. Now, there is obviously a point that you can buff them to, where now they're suddenly, you know, like, okay, well, you know, gain 1,000. Okay, that'll win me the game, right? So that's on the extreme end. Obviously, they'll never have a hero, well, probably never have a hero power like that. But you get what I'm talking about. But the issue with that is, across all MMRs, if you look at the lowest ranges, when you have hero powers that just give you stats, those actually perform quite well because it's very straightforward. And at the lower MMR, players are not comfortable enough yet to get to a golden brand consistently, to get to those scaling engines, and they don't manage their cards well enough to get these huge boards. So a Cthulhu is now all of a sudden playable and actually quite decent at, let's say, you know, 3,000 or 4,000 MMR. A Jailer and you buff a Cleave, that could win a lobby at 3,000 MMR, right? You could just like buff a Cleave and that's your whole game plan. And now you have a, let's say, a 40/40 Cleave, and that just dumpsters someone's board, and all of a sudden you're winning the lobby. Ragnaros, same thing. You could technically just have a Cleave in the front and then a Divine Shield in the back, and you have a Drakari, and you know, you're scaling that, and you could win the lobby. But at the level that I play at, and honest, I guess we can maybe even just call it like 6,000 and above. I think that's tough as well, because obviously I haven't been playing at that MMR for like a very long time. But yeah, that's my instinct, that these kind of heroes, it's very difficult to make them good. Because if you make them too good, then all of a sudden at lower MMR, they are just insane. Guff now goes from 25 to 20. There were already moments where you could consider taking a Guff, so this might actually now be like, oh, Guff, okay, let's do that. 20 tiers, I can see that. Like an Overconfidence is worth 3 tiers for 1 gold. Hamul is worth like 6 tiers for 2 gold. So there's some options. That'll be interesting to try Guff a little bit more. Originally, I think the original version was 30, which is insane, because, you know, you just compare that to a Silas and you're like, holy crap, why am I buying 30 tiers worth? But once you get to the late game, it is quite an engine. So That's the main struggle with Guff. It's getting to the end game. But now that you have 20, you could probably take a 5-drop in a relative. I think 6 might still be a little tricky in this meta because you have to pay for your trinket and all that. But yeah, I think yeah, this is a cool change. I think now Guff is quite pickable. Eudora goes back to 4 digs. Okay, Eudora was the strongest hero in the game when she was 4 digs, and that was a long time ago, and there's a lot of power creep since then, so I don't think we have to be worried that suddenly Eudora is like insanely broken. But yeah, the 4 digs is obviously way nicer because now you can dig twice. 5 digs, very difficult to dig twice. 4 digs, you could do that, very possible. You can just reform curve, and then you can take the 5-drop, or you can, well, 5-drop as in you get a golden minion up to tier 4, and then you play it and you get the reward, which is a 5-drop. Or you could dig on turn 1 and you could go for a 4-drop. So you have to see a little bit what your shop looks like. But with 4 digs, it is now reasonable to go for the second one. We'll definitely pick Eudora and try that out. That's obviously way better than the previous version. Cariel unfortunately is one of those heroes as well that just doesn't give you additional resources. It just gives you buffs, and those buffs are generally not good enough at higher MMR. So she falls in the same category as the Jailer, the Edwin, and all that. But it starts at 3 minions, and yeah, I think in Trinket meta, it's just not a thing. I think there's too many resources available. It's too easy to just pop off and have this be completely irrelevant. And then I really don't want to invest gold in buffing my board like that. So again, I would say 6k and above, probably not. Pyramid, on the other hand, doesn't cost gold. You're getting the health without having to invest resources. Not an insane hero, but I would rather have a Pyramid than, you know, a Cariel or an Edwin or a Ragnaros, because at least here, I'm not losing resources. I just want armor, and I want to be able to buy my trinkets. I want to be able to not really take damage. It's not as good as, say, an Omu, which provides me with more economy, so it's much easier to buy the things I want to buy, but at least it doesn't cost me gold. Ragnaros is free yeah, when you're dead. Isn't it good in the early game? It's good in the early game, but what happens is now I'm spending money on buffing my board instead of leveling, instead of buying more minions. So what happens with Cariel is that it could be that 3, suddenly you're in a position where you've saved enough health that it's justified, but that gold comes from somewhere, right? When you look at it that way. So let's say you're hero powering on turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, turn 5. That means you're essentially going Reform curve, but you're not using Reform's hero power. Reform curve, Reform gains a gold every time he hero powers because you're going to steal a minion, which is a gold for you. Look at the other way, Cariel loses a gold every time she hero powers because you're not getting that minion in return, and you're not able to put that gold towards leveling up or buying minions. So that's just the thing I don't like. I don't like having to invest gold early because that means I'm not going to be able to have as many minions on my board, which is going to make decisions in the mid game a lot more difficult because I don't have leftover minions to sell to buy stuff. All right, Ozumat now goes to a 2/2 instead of a 1/1, which is cool. They buffed Ozumat from being a 2/2 that spawns only if you had space at the start of the fight to then being a 1/1 that would spawn anytime. And looks like they just looked at the win rates and they were like, oh, that's still not broken or anything. Let's make it back to being a 2/2. I like that, you know. Now I could consider an Ozumat just because Ozumat's hero power used to be just dead by the time you had a full board, or at least in the mid game, by the time you had a reasonable full board, because you just wouldn't want to sell. Like, a lot of the time the minion you had was just better than the tentacle. So then armor changes. So less armor for Pyramid, Cthulhu, Guff, Cariel, Jailer, Ozumat, Rag, Edwin, Eudora, Sarfang. Yeah, Eudora coming down to 13 makes sense. Sourfang coming down makes sense as well with the 2 health. Guff now being 12 makes sense if you're gonna make it easier to proc. And then yeah, Pyramid with a little bit more. Yeah, I mean, these are whatever. I would say Eudora is probably the most. Eudora and Guff are probably the most impactful ones here. Where now it's a little easier to die, but you have more value from your hero power. The trinkets, if you get a pivot trinket offered now, so pivot trinkets are discounted by 2 instead of 1. So it's gonna make it a little easier to take something that your board wasn't really happy with. And honestly, I've had some cool games off pivot trinkets, so I'm okay with that. I think that's good. Then there have been some trinkets added again. Lesser pouch, greater pouch, and then greater cheese wheel are back with some changes, and we'll cover that. Greater Pie, Greater Sky Lanterns are now out of the pool, and the lesser ones are in the greater pool. So what that means is that these things were way too strong, and they should not have a greater variant. So their lesser variant is strong enough to be a greater variant, and I agree with that. Greater Pie was insanely broken. It was just too easy to pop off with Urzel. I completely flew under my radar. When I initially reviewed Greater Pie, I did not see the potential with just how easily you could buff your shop with a brand and then, you know, sell stuff like Tempest and all that. And then Greater Sky Lantern, it's just too easy to put yourself in a position where you go like Souvenir Stand, you pick Greater Sky Lantern, now you have summoned 4 things of the first thing that got summoned, and all you need to do is get either a big Bream or you even summon a Belcher out of your hand, and now you're summoning 5 Belchers per fight, which is obviously just super silly. So here are those changes. The Lesser Cheese Wheel is now every 5 times. I think that's fair. They really want to attack those shop buffs. I honestly wasn't really taking Small Cheese Wheel because most of the time, as long as you have Rewinder, Bran, and Urzel, you're going to be fine, even without help from trinkets. Which is probably the main problem with demons right now. It's just there's a bit of a critical mass of just good demon cards. We have Lesser Pie now as a greater trinket for 0 gold. So yeah, that's half as effective as the Greater Pie was before. Probably pickable. In the right spots, pickable. Where you have your Bran, your Urzel, and you just need a way to buff the shop. So yeah, not insane, but pickable. Because 0 gold gives you a good turn. Then Sky Lanterns is now a greater trinket. We've covered that. Calligraphy goes from Avenge 5 to Avenge 4. But it does cost a gold now, which I think is good. Avenge 5 was so bad. I'm actually interested in trying this. Nurglish goes to a 3-2 instead of a 3-3. I think that's fair. I think Nurglish book was quite strong. Belcher is now 3-3 instead of 5-5. Yeah, also fair. Quite frustrating to fight this trinket early. And something we are seeing, which is a really cool trend, is that they are making trinkets cheaper. Now, why is that interesting? It means that you have fewer turns where it's, I buy my trinket and end my turn. Your move, Yugi boy. It's not quite so fun to be like, oh, so the correct play is to skip my turn here. Playing cards is fun. Playing minions is fun. Playing with Bran, cycling stuff, buffing your board, that's fun. Having to just end your turn and have that be optimal, not so fun. So every time I had to buy a chess set for 9, every time I had to buy a Felbat for 9, not a fun experience. Especially if you like, oh, this is, if I want to win, this is the correct play. So I like that. I like that they're making the trinkets cheaper. It gives you more agency. It makes it more fun to execute those turns. Kodo Letter Pouch goes from 0 gold to 2 gold, but now it buffs 2 minions. So how does that compare to Booty Bay Brew? Booty Bay is still, but this is card? Yeah. I don't know how much I like this then. I think it really depends on the situation. If all I need is just some tempo, then fine. Because sometimes all I'm looking for in a game is that I can roll a Peggy on tier 4 and pump my board a little bit. But you're still spreading the buffs very randomly. Peggy is much nicer. This one is something that I have to try, but I think in the right situation, you could pick it up. I don't think it's ever anything you want to play around, right? You're not like, oh, I'm Kodo Letter Pouch this game. I think it's literally something you take when your gold lines up, where you're like, oh, I could spend 2 gold comfortably here because I wanted to stay down or because I played an investment or whatnot. And then you're just like, okay, I'll buy it. And then on tier 4, I'll cycle some cards. Greater Shaker Portrait now. At high MMR, this makes no sense. But the portrait itself doesn't really make sense, I would say. I think that at lower, as a lesser trinket, I would never take it right now because Deep Blue isn't really a strategy because Shelemental is out. Which I don't necessarily regret because Shelemental is, I don't think, very healthy for the game. I think it's very easy to abuse. In order for Shelemental to be a thing, they would have, you know, they disabled Jandis in Naga lobbies. Vol'jin's hero power got completely reworked. There's a lot of stuff that's suddenly like, oh, you can't do that because it would be broken with Shelly. That happens so often where you would like, oh, you couldn't do that because that would be broken with Shelly. So I don't think it's a bad idea necessarily to disable it, but the side effect of that is that now you don't really pop off with Deep Blue anymore. You just do okay, and doing okay in the trinket meta is not good enough. Because, you know, like people build huge demon boards and, you know, that's too strong, or there's lava lamp elementals or any of that. And this just doesn't really compare. So at lower ranks, I can still see this being decent, because if you start off with a Zesty and a Deep Blue and you're just like, okay, well now, you know, turn 9 rolls around and I get my Shaker Portrait, cool, I can play that. But for again, I would say 6k and above, I don't think it's going to be good enough. Lava Lamp is now 2 gold, but it's after every 5 minions. I think that's fair. This thing was annoying because it being correct to essentially skip your turn 6 was really annoying. Being like, oh, I'll just pay 6 out of my 7 gold here and then float that remaining gold because I didn't get a 1-cost spell. And then I'll start to try and go infinite with Wraith and Elementals and just pop off. So I like that they nerfed it because it was a little too good. And the cost being cheaper than is fun. Now, I don't know if 5 is going to be good or even viable, so I'll try it. But especially if you start off with a Party Elemental pair, Lava Lamp was really nice. It was just a lot of tempo in the mid game, and then you got a lot of value there. So Charging Staff generally already made your minions a way too high attack anyway, at least for that stage of the game. So I would much rather pay 2 gold less and only get 3 attack instead of 4. So that's nice. Lorewalker Scrolls, same deal. It goes from 4 gold to 1 gold, and then you only get +2/+1 instead of +2/+2. So I really love that trend of let's just make the trinkets cheaper so that you have more decisions to make on that turn. Blingtron goes from 2 gold to 1 gold. After you summon a mech, give it Divine Shield. Yeah, I don't know. This one I just don't play, so. But hey, it's cheaper, I guess. That's good. Holy Mallet, cheaper now. Right, I got this for 0 in my last game, and I actually won because it was very useful for me to have a 0-cost trinket. So it was from 3 gold to 2 gold, and now they've changed that pivot trinkets cost you 2 less. So in this case, 0 instead of 1 less. So that was actually quite cool that in the first game we played, it was actually very relevant, these changes, because that turn set me up for the win. Because I was able to level to tier 4 because of that change. And then because I was doing well, I was able to go to tier 5 on 9 gold. Whereas if I had to take a greedier trinket, like for instance trip vouchers, I wouldn't have been able to level that aggressively. Or if the mallet had cost me gold, I wouldn't have been able to level and buy the minion that I did. So yeah, we've already got some positive experience with the pivot cost change. Yogg is one of the only ones early that is still quite expensive. At 5 gold, it's extremely unlikely you're going to be able to level and get Yogg, but it's still cheaper, so that's nice. Medivh at 3 gold, it's again considerable to level. Not super easy. 2 gold is usually easy. 3 gold, you'd have to sell a unit or you need to have cast investment. But still a fan of those cheaper, lesser trinkets. Then this change is relevant for sure. Now this costs 2 gold, which is fair because it's a Galakrond hero power now instead of just random. So this gets quite good when you have a triple lined up. So if you can triple on that turn, you have a harder time leveling, but especially if you have an economy triple, it might still work where you have extra coins in your hand or so. But one of the moves that I liked doing was on turn 6, level to tier 4, triple into a 5-drop, and then evolve it into a 6-drop. So now with Token of the Old Gods, it's going to be harder to do that because it costs you 2 gold, but the upside that you can discover is well worth it. So I'll mess around with that. Then Big Cheese Wheel is also every 5 times. Big Cheese Wheel, generally way better than Small Cheese Wheel because you're not going to roll that much early. So you're not really going to be able to use your lesser trinkets for quite a while. Whereas once you're on tier 9, you roll a lot more because now you're looking for good cards instead of just making the most out of your shop. Like if I get this offered or I get Pie, what would I want? Probably still this, right? Every 5 times. I guess it depends on my amount of Malkazars, really. Greater Boar goes from 7 gold to 3 gold, but for an extra +2/+2. This must be a lower MMR thing because I cannot imagine looking at greater trinkets for all the cool stuff they do and be like, I will take +2/+2 to my gems for a whole greater trinket. Yeah, this is actually really weird for me to look at this. It's like, how could this be worth a greater trinket? This one might be one where they literally just looked at numbers and looked at stats and they ended up with something that didn't make sense. And that might be my lack of experience with balancing. But this really feels like, oh, we'll just go off the win rates and we'll just, you know, everything's getting a little cheaper and we have to make it worse because it's going to be cheaper. And now you're just like, well, why the hell would I want to, you know, get a Jazzer or 2 Jazzer procs? Sorry, if you have Bran or Titus, it's basically 1 Piper proc and 1 Jazzer proc, right? one Piper proc, 1 Jazzer proc is actually insane for a whole greater trinket. Yeah, okay, anyways, let's move on. So this might have been a swing and a miss, where they may have to just delete this trinket or change it altogether. Again, there is that problem with lower MMR, because at higher MMR, you could make this gem value quite a bit more, and it wouldn't even be that relevant, because most people can build just bigger boards anyways. But at lower MMR, if you have someone that tripled into a Charlie and suddenly your gems are giving 4/4, that's game winning, probably, which is kind of silly to say. So there is again that balance where they need to make sure that, you know, people at 3,000 MMR, 3,500, 4,000 don't just automatically win the game with some trinkets. Yeah, greater calligraphy, 4 gold. Yeah, okay. Well, put these two together and suddenly you're like, oh, this makes no sense. So for 1 additional gold, I need to have 1 combat, and I have basically the same buff, right? Not quite the same, but almost the same. Yeah, having these 2 in the game next to each other makes no sense. Yeah, this has to give you that big chunk up front. Otherwise, there is no reason to take it. Then Big Book is now 5/5 instead of 6/6. Yep, that's in line with what we saw in the lesser version. Then this again, right? Belcher being 12/12 and 3 gold instead of 15/15. That's in line with the lesser version nerf. Blood Golem going to 3 gold instead of 4 gold. This is one of those trinkets that's unplayable until it's not. And when it's not, it's insane. If you have the right setup for this, it's really annoying. But the right setup is I have 2 guys with a shit ton of gems on them. So now you're suddenly... This is for like a Prophet of the Boar hot air balloon surveyor build. It's very specific, but if you have a build that can really, really condense blood gems, it's really good. Because you could say, oh, you could just do gem transfer later and spread the gems out, but it's just, it's a bit too annoying. Because then your trinket doesn't really do much for too long. And having your greater trinket not do much for too long is annoying. If you have the right specific setup for this, it's insane. Because now, let's say you have a 400 health and a 300 health Quillbore on your board, which can happen, right? With the right early game, the right lesser trinket, and then the ability to generate a lot of gems. Now you have these huge chunkers in the mid game that when they die, summon another huge chunker. So, but for almost all other situations, it's horrible. So yeah, this one is a tough one to get right. Fridge magnet, 3 golds, that's fair. You know, everything's getting a little cheaper, so it's just in line with all the other changes. Big pouch is now 8/8 because you buff 2 random minions. Again, it just feels not impactful enough. I would much rather have my greater trinkets make it easier for me to get to a place where I'm infinite than something that helps me scale once I'm infinite. Because generally, once you're infinite, you're good. You have infinite resources, you can do whatever you want. You can build a board that wins. Whereas something that then it's sort of like a win more in that regard. The lesser one I can see a little bit more because the lesser one could be the thing you need to pick to stabilize. But stabilizing with +8/+8 every time you buy a card. Yeah, I mean, for a turn or two, maybe, right? But you're still just bunkering down. I don't know. I will try it at some point for sure. My instinct is right now I don't really see it. I don't think it's good enough for it to suddenly be a trinket. Conductor now costs 2 gold, but it goes back to buffing the whole board. I think that's fine. The one where it didn't buff your whole board felt bad. Like I stopped picking it. I'm happy that this buffs the whole board again. Whoa, this one matters a lot, right? So Balladist now gives attack with this trinket. So yeah, you get a cleave, you get a brand. Bam! That's a big boy cleave. So I like this. This could be too strong. It could also not, right? So I have to play with it, but it's way better than before. That's for sure. And pirates need to help. So honestly, I'm down to try. They can always nerf it again if it's too good. Felbat goes to 6 gold, but that's because Felbat got nerfed. So we're gonna cover that later. But again, we see these greater trinkets become cheaper, which I think is fun. Now you don't have to waste your turn. Jar of Gems is 4 gold instead of 3 gold. One of the only ones that becomes more expensive, but this one is also super good in specific situations. In the situation where you're able to buff your gems and you have a setup for Tough Tusk, this is very good. Almost everything else, it's whatever, not quite worth taking, but if you can set it up with Tough Tusk, it's nice. It's actually more than nice. It's really solid. So Dishware goes from 5 to 4. Yep, that's one again, just like a little cheaper. Then Tip Jar now is 4 gold per turn. Okay, I like that. This is interesting because these are trinkets that just they just give you more flexibility. And I already had to take it sometimes, so I'm pretty happy with that. That's a fun change. Medivh 5 to 4, again, same thing, just a little cheaper. 4 to 3 on this one, but we are going to 15 attack. I think that's reasonable. 20 attack was so much. Yeah, it was so good. Wait, if you had the right build for it, right? Then chess set, that's a big one. It now only summons a copy of the leftmost minion. And the sad part here is I think that's still okay. compare this, right? So you're paying 5 gold and you're summon a copy of your leftmost minion. 3 gold and my gems give 2/2. Because usually you only really have one really nice minion to copy, and then the second one is a scam card or so. But for the mid game, it doesn't matter that much, because for the mid game, a lot of the time it was just annoying to have to make the board space to summon the second minion. Because a lot of the time the second minion was like kind of whatever. Because when you buff, a lot of the time you have the option of just putting your buffs on one unit. And when you're playing with chess set, you either put it all on one unit and then you copy a second unit that's not really worth copying, or you spread out the buffs. This way you don't even have to think about it too much. So is this a buff to chess set? No, of course not. Summoning 2 is way better because you have the option, and later in the game you can copy a Leroy and such. But just the fact that this used to summon 3 and then 2 and now 1, and the fact that I'm saying I don't think this is unpickable, I think this is pickable in certain positions, that's kind of crazy just how insane this trinket was. But yeah, this is not really an automaton thing, right? So I don't think automaton is really a strategy, at least at high MMR. Again, very, very unlikely you're going to see it. This is more of a, oh, I have a big Urzel, I'm going to copy that to stabilize. Oh, I have a Foe Reaper, I'm going to copy that to stabilize. That's really what this trinket is a lot of the time. It's a stabilization trinket because you have one unit worth copying, and then later in the game you can make use of it to try and win by having this insane unit you're copying. Then Sushi Roll is 5 gold now. Was this out of the pool for a bit? I don't know. Maybe it's out of the pool because I don't play Nagas. Yeah, I don't really see it. But yeah, sure, whatever. It's your spellcraft cast twice. I wonder if this could be uncapped with Shelemental out of the game. I think it's worth trying. I think with Shelemental out of the picture, it's worth trying to see if it's okay. All right, Mana Saber out because Grandma in. Mana Saber is really frustrating with Leapers, so I like that. It's too easy to have this insane setup, so kind of Grandma to replace it. And then Lord of Gains is back. That is nice. Nagas really need to help. So I think that's just okay. That just gives you more options to high roll Nagas. Honcho to a 3/3, sure, whatever. Like I said, there's a lot of changes we're not really going to bother with. Yeah, 5/3 here, just a little bit better, right? Again, more scaling here. I don't think these are like revolutionary changes that are going to completely warp the game, but this is nice with Nurglish. Nurglish, either the small or the big book. Lock Prince works really well with that. Burglar goes to 4/4 instead of 6/6. I think that's fair. This thing buffed so much so easily. This was so strong with Magnetics. Got 2 Burglars on the board, Magnetic in the hand, and then Beatboxer. Yeah. Cyclone being a 5/1. Yep, that's fair. That's fine. Sea Glass starts at a 4/4. Again, fair. Azurite is 6/6. I think is also good. Yeah. Tier 4. People weren't really playing Azurite. Now here, Pilgrim to 5. That is super relevant. I don't think it's enough to kill off that Urzel engine though, because a lot of the time you were on 5 earlier. It is just going to mean that there's going to be fewer people that can play demons. Before this patch, in a good demon lobby, it was not rare to see 5 people in the lobby playing demons. I think with Pilgrim going to tier 5, it's a lot harder to just pick up a Rewinder early and then hit good stuff on tier 4. We're going to see Malchezaar also going to tier 4, so you can't pick up Malchezaar on 3, you can't pick up Pilgrim on 4. That's going to help reduce the number of people that will play demons, but it's not going to change the fact that the person winning a good demon lobby is going to be a demon player, if that makes sense. Because I don't really see something in the changes. We'll first cover everything and then I'll give you my take on that. So yeah, Malchezaar 4, again, I think that's fair, right? It's going to make it harder to do demon stuff. Felbat is no longer buffing itself, which I don't love. Like, I get it. I think that the moment trinkets are gone, they should revert this change immediately, because Felbat not buffing itself always felt so horrible. Just completely unpickable garbage card. Don't think it's necessarily going to be unpickable garbage now, just because you could run 2 of them a little bit easier with the Felbat portrait. Right, all you have to do is just find 1 more and then they can buff each other. But still, it's yeah, that's a feel bad nerf. It's not a fun card to play with if it's not buffing itself. But in this meta, I can see it just because I don't even think it's lower MMR. I think it's just at the highest MMRs, like let's say like 10,000 and above. It's hard to win with Felbat portrait, relying on Felbat. I think Felbat portrait and then just play Urzel is better, which is hilarious, right? Urzel is just broken, but it requires skill. It requires experience, right? It's not like insanely difficult to play some demons with an Urzel, but consistently surviving to the point where you have a buffed shop, where you have a brand, where you have an Urzel, and you set that up, that does not happen as much in the lower MMR ranges. And I think for Felbat, you can probably still win quite a bit of lobbies doing Felbat stuff on, I don't know. It's even hard to put an MMR number on it, but that feels more exclusive. So before, when I was talking about those hero changes and I said, oh, that's usually like, let's say up to 6k. After 6k, it's not going to be that easy to just, you know, win off making one huge cleave with a jailer or something like that. With Felbat, I think at 6k, you can still quite comfortably, with old Felbat, right? So if you have old Felbats and you get 2 of them and you get Drukhari and you eat the shop, it's solid. It's just the very top end of ladder. It's not good enough. You need to rely on Urzul. But anyways, that's not relevant for this review because that's such a small portion of the players. But I can't help but think about it because that's what I'm facing in my own games. So yes, I think it was necessary. When I look at the big picture, I think it's necessary to not have Felbat do what it did before, because it's too easy with a portrait to just win in almost every MMR range. All right, Guardian being a 1/4, that's nice. Actually, that's way better for a 1-drop now. That's super solid. This is now tier 4. Okay, that's just some dragon help. This is tier 5, but it's now 2 health. That is relevant. You're going to be able to make very healthy boards with this. So you get this golden version and then some ways to proc it, like with blood gems. All of a sudden, you get a very healthy board. So I think we're going to see a little bit more menagerie stuff with this guy now. Like, I already played him in my last game, and it felt decent, and I didn't even have a good setup for it. I was just using Lightfang to buff. But yeah, that's double the efficiency here, going from 1 to 2 and then 2 to 4. Clunker to 5, that's fair. This card is very strong. This is, like, when you have Bran and you have mechs on your board, this is like, you always buy this, because if you get to a Quartertrons, you've already recovered the money for next turn, and then every turn from that, you're just making bank. So yeah, Clunker was super fun to play with. Grease Spot is now +2/+1, and it's a 2/5. That's hard to predict because the meta is so top-end heavy, where you just create these huge boards, and Grease Spot is still quite limited by how much it can scale. I think in very specific lobbies, it might be okay in the mid-game, but that's about it. I don't think we're going to see like full end-game Grease Spot builds. You still just gain way too many stats with other strategies. Ice Fisher to 4 I think is cool. Yeah, this thing started out as a 6-drop, and my god, was it way too slow. On 4 it makes sense because now you can have this on the board with a Peggy, and now you're making quite a bit, you're getting quite a bit of tempo. So I'm a big fan of this change. I like this a lot. Wrangler to 4 also helps a lot. The buff itself does not get nerfed, so this with blood gems, this with spellcraft, this can help you stabilize quite nicely. Really cool. Both Ice Fisher and Wrangler on 4 make it easier to stabilize on tier 4, especially, you know, if those types are in. So that is nice. I like that option, because if you're dying and you can't go to tier 5 and you're not rolling good cards on 4 to defend your life total with, that's a horrible experience. Yeah, this is a 4/4. That doesn't matter too much. It's a nice little buff. Right, not a huge deal. Atissa to 5. That is a huge deal. Yeah. Okay. So they're really trying to make Nagas viable here. They're introducing Lord of Gains back into the pool. And Atissa is now a 5-drop, which buffs 3 Nagas instead of 4, but that's fair because it's now much easier to get 2 of these. So yeah, that's cool. I'm interested to see what this is gonna do. I'll play around with this 100%. Yeah, try to get a bunch of Atissas on the board. A-Bomb is now buffed. Okay, kind of whatever. 3/3. Yeah, I mean, if you have a good setup for this card is good in mid game, but you need to have a right setup for it. You need to have something like a Titus with the 4/4 that summons 4 1/1s, and then you just get a huge A-Bomb, or you have to be Terron, or you have to be Sneed. So it's still quite niche, but maybe now it's not quite as niche anymore. I'm not sure. The whole problem is that this doesn't really go anywhere. Overflow Undead builds is just bad, sadly. It just does not, it's not able to put out enough scaling to keep up with the builds that buy and sell cards, right? The builds that are doing more stuff. Lightfang is now 4/4. Yep, that's fair. We actually just had a Lightfang game. It's horribly slow when it comes to end game. So I don't think you can end a game playing Lightfang, but I think that it's quite a good option in the mid game. If you have 2 Lightfangs and a Drukhari in the mid game, you're going to win a lot of rounds. But then once people come online with demons, once people come online with elementals, your scaling will fall off because you are working with a static amount of scaling. It's not going to get much bigger other than I rolled another Lightfang or I made my Drukhari golden. Whereas if you're playing with Bran and you suddenly get a golden Bran, or you're playing with Rock and you got another Rock, you've now doubled your scaling. That is very relevant. So later in the game, it falls off a cliff. But mid-game, this is going to be fair, most likely. Robust Evolution is now 1 gold. Yeah, and I'm not sure if I want to buy it for 1 gold. I think this is probably best used with Deep Blue, right? And you make a huge You make a huge minion. Then Devourer goes from 4 gold to 3 gold. That's fair, right? I like that. I don't think Devourer is OP, so it's just a very fun and useful card. So let's yeah, I like that. Cost reduction. Duos, lol. All right. It went from tier 5 and 2 gold to tier 4 and 3 gold. I suppose it being 3 gold is probably the more annoying one than it being on 5, but I'll let Collins handle that in his review. Collins does not like the change. All right. Let us know why it's not good. All right. It being on 4 is actually better. Okay. So the Duos expert in my chat says that it's actually better now. So, and Portal was really, really good before because it's the way you break the game by picking up a magnetic and moving it to the other player, or picking up a powerful battle cry, moving it to the other player and all that. All right, and that's it, right? Okay, quite a review.